I rode with the King of Gondor for 3 years and didn't know it. His name was Strider. At least that's what he told us. A ranger like the rest of us, patrolling the wild lands, hunting orcs, defending villages that would never know we existed. Just another grey-cloaked wanderer in a world full of shadows. Except he wasn't like the rest of us. Not even close. He fought like he'd trained with elven warriors for decades. Spoke Sindarin like he'd grown up in Rivendell. Carried a sword that was far too fine, too ancient, too perfect for a common ranger. And when things got desperate, when we were outnumbered and surrounded, and moments from death, he'd take command with a voice that made hardened warriors obey without question. We called him the Grey Ghost. Said he appeared when the darkness was thickest. Said he'd been ranging longer than anyone could remember. Said he had elf blood in him, or wizard training, or some secret past he'd never talk about. We had no idea how right we were. 23 years after we parted ways, I stood in the crowd at Minas Tirith and watched them crown the King of Gondor. Watched Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir of Isildur, returned king of the Dunedain, take the throne his ancestors had abandoned 3,000 years ago. And I recognized him, the set of his shoulders, the way he stood, the voice that had once told me to hold the line while orcs screamed toward us in the dark. Strider, the ranger I'd ridden with, the man I'd shared campfires with, the warrior I'd fought beside in a dozen battles, and never thought to ask who he really was. I'd been riding with the king, with the heir to the greatest kingdom in Middle-earth, with a legend walking among us in grey rags and worn boots, protecting people who would never know his name, and I never knew. None of us did. This is that story. The story of 3 years riding with the greatest warrior in Middle-earth while thinking he was just another ranger. The story of the man who became king but spent 60 years serving in silence, fighting in shadows, saving people who would never thank him because they'd never know he existed. The story of Strider, before the world knew him as Aragorn. My name is Halborn. I'm a ranger of the north, or I was before. Age made my sword arm slow and my eyes dim. I've spent 40 years patrolling the borders of Eriador, keeping the wild lands safe from the things that creep out of Angmar and the Misty Mountains. Orcs mostly. Sometimes wargs. Occasionally worse things that don't have names. It's thankless work. The people we protect, the hobbits in the Shire, the men of Bree, the scattered villages throughout Eriador. They don't know we exist. Don't know that the reason they sleep safely is because rangers like me spend cold nights in the wild, making sure the darkness stays back. That's fine. We don't do it for thanks. We do it because someone has to. Because the alternative is letting evil spread unchecked. Because we're the descendants of the men of Westerness, and we remember what our ancestors stood for, even if our kingdoms have faded to nothing. I was 34 years old when I met Strider. Been ranging for 12 years at that point. Thought I knew everything there was to know about surviving in the wild. Thought I was pretty good with a sword. Thought I'd seen most of what the darkness had to offer. I was wrong on all counts. It was early spring, year 2990 of the Third Age. My patrol, 6 rangers, was tracking an orc band through the Weather Hills. They'd raided a village near Bree, killed 3 farmers, stolen livestock. Standard orc behavior. We were going to make sure they didn't make it back to whatever hole they'd crawled out of. We found them in a ravine. Counted maybe 15 orcs. Bad odds, but manageable if we were smart about it. We'd use the high ground, pick them off with arrows, finish any survivors in melee. Standard tactics. Should have been routine. except the orcs had friends we didn't know about. Another 20 came out of caves we hadn't spotted. We'd walked into an ambush thinking we were the hunters. Suddenly we were 6 rangers, surrounded by 35 orcs in a ravine with no escape routes. The kind of situation where you know you're going to die, but you fight anyway because that's what rangers do. We formed a circle, drew swords, prepared to take as many of them with us as we could. The orcs charged, screaming their hatred in the black speech, waving crude blades and axes, and then someone dropped into the ravine from above, landed in a crouch between us and the orcs. One man, alone, wearing grey and green ranger gear that had seen better days. He stood up slowly, drew a sword that caught the light and gleamed like it had been forged by masters. Not the rough iron most rangers carried. This was something else, something ancient and beautiful and absolutely wrong for a common ranger to own. 6 against 35, he said. His voice was calm, almost amused. Poor odds for the orcs. Then he attacked. I'd been fighting orcs for 12 years. Thought I knew how combat worked. Thought I understood what skill looked like. I'd never seen anything like him. He moved like water, like wind, like something that couldn't be touched. Every strike killed. Every movement flowed into the next. No wasted motion, no hesitation, no fear. The orcs tried to swarm him. He cut through them like they were standing still. His sword was everywhere at once, parrying, striking, killing. 5 orcs went down in the first 10 seconds, 10 more in the next 20. We just stood there watching, too stunned to move, too awed to help. He killed 20 orcs in under 2 minutes. The remaining 15 broke and ran. He let them go, didn't chase, just cleaned his blade and turned to look at us. You should probably be more careful about checking for secondary positions, he said. Orcs are stupid, but they're not that stupid. Then he sheathed his sword and started walking away. Wait, I called out. Who are you? He paused, looked back. His face was weathered, hard-lined, older than I'd thought at first glance. Maybe 50? Maybe older, hard to tell with some men, especially if they had Dúnedain blood. Grey streaked his dark hair. His eyes were grey too, sharp and clear and old in ways that had nothing to do with years. Call me Strider, he said. That's not a name. It's the name I'm giving you. He smiled slightly. Not unkind, just private. Like someone who'd had this conversation before and knew how it would end. You're Halborn. You lead this patrol. You're good at tracking, but you rushed this hunt because you were angry about the farmers who died. Anger makes you careless. How do you know my name? I know all the rangers. He tilted his head toward the north. There's a cave 3 miles that way. Defensible. Good water. You should camp there tonight. More orcs will come looking for this band when they don't return. You don't want to be here when they do. Come with us, I said. Not asking, almost begging, because a man who could fight like that, who could turn a hopeless battle into a slaughter, who could save 6 rangers with casual ease, you didn't let someone like that walk away. Ride with us, at least for a few days. We could use someone with your skills. He studied me for a long moment, those grey eyes seeing more than I wanted them to see. Then he nodded once. 3 miles north, he said. I'll meet you there after dark. I have something to check first. He vanished into the brush before I could respond. Just gone. Like he'd never been there at all. We found the cave where he'd said it would be, made camp, built a small fire, tended our wounds, superficial, because we'd barely fought at all. Strider had done everything. Who is he? Beren, my second, asked. I've never seen anyone fight like that. Dúnedain, said Targon, our tracker. Has to be. That sword, that skill, he's got the blood of Westernessa in him. We've all got that blood, I pointed out. We're all Dunedain, but none of us fight like that. Maybe he trained in Rivendell, suggested Caramir. The elves teach fighting there. Could be he spent time with them. Or maybe he's just been ranging longer than any of us, said Beren. Maybe after 40 years in the wild, you get that good, if you survive that long. We debated it for an hour, got nowhere. Finally gave up and settled in for the night. Strider arrived an hour after dark, materialized out of the shadows like a ghost, made no sound. We only knew he was there when he stepped into the firelight. The orc band came from Angmar, he said without preamble. There's a nest about 20 miles northeast, maybe 100 of them. They've been raiding south for supplies. Someone's organizing them. How do you know that? I asked. I followed the survivors, watched them return, counted their numbers. He settled by the fire, accepted dried meat when Targon offered it. You can't attack them with 6 rangers. You'd need 20, maybe 30. Then we'll go back to the angle, get reinforcements, return in force. By the time you return, they'll have moved. Orcs don't stay in one place when they know they've been spotted. He ate methodically, not tasting the food, just consuming fuel. Better to watch them, track them when they move, find where they're really based and deal with them there. You seem to know a lot about orc tactics. I've been hunting them for a long time. How long? He smiled slightly. Longer than you've been alive. I was 34. That would make him, 55 at minimum. But he moved like a man in his prime. Fought like someone who'd seen 1,000 battles and learned from everyone. Will you ride with us? I asked. Help us track them. Help us deal with them when we find their base? For a time, he looked at me with those grey eyes. I have business in the south eventually. But for now, yes, I'll ride with you. And just like that, Strider joined our patrol. The first month was strange. Strider never talked about himself, never mentioned where he'd come from, or where he'd trained, or who his family was. He'd answer direct questions with vague non-answers that sounded like answers until you thought about them later. Where did you learn to fight like that? Here and there. Many places. Who taught you? Good teachers. Patient teachers. Where's your family? Gone. Most of them. Why do they call you Strider? Because I walk a lot. It was infuriating, like trying to grab smoke. Every conversation went in circles until you gave up and stopped asking. But he was easy to travel with. Never complained. Never slowed us down. Could march 20 miles without rest, go 3 days without sleep if needed, survive on nothing but water and dried meat for weeks. He knew every inch of Eriador like he'd been walking it for decades. Could find water in the driest places. Could tell you what the weather would be 3 days hence by looking at the sky. Could track anything across bare stone. And he could fight. We ran into orcs twice that first month. Small bands, 5 or 6 each. Strider killed them all before the rest of us could even engage. Not showing off, not making a point. Just efficient, clinical. Like he'd done this so many times it was reflexive. After the second time, Beren pulled me aside. He's not normal, Beren said quietly. I don't know what he is, but he's not just a ranger. I know. So what do we do about it? Nothing. I watched Strider cleaning his blade, methodical as always. He's helping us. He's keeping us alive. And whatever secrets he's keeping, they're his to keep. What if he's dangerous? He is dangerous. He's the most dangerous person I've ever met. But he's dangerous to orcs, to enemies. Not to us. Beren wasn't satisfied, but he let it drop. The third month, we found the orc nest. Strider had been right. They'd moved after we attacked, their raiding party. But he tracked them anyway, across 60 miles of rough country, reading signs none of the rest of us could see. We followed him, and he never led us wrong. We found them holed up in a ruined fort in the hills east of the Angle. Old Dunedin construction, abandoned centuries ago, now occupied by maybe 90 orcs. They were using it as a staging ground for raids into Eriador. Weapons stockpiled, food stores, plans for bigger attacks. "We can't take 90 orcs with 7 rangers," Baron said. We were watching from a hilltop a mile away. "Even with Strider, the numbers are too bad." "We're not going to attack directly," Strider said. He'd been studying the fort through most of the afternoon. "We're going to make them come out, fight them in small groups, winnow their numbers until they break." "How?" "They send out hunting parties every morning, 6 or 7 orcs. We ambush those parties, kill them all, every day for a week. By the end, they'll be terrified, disorganized, starting to panic. Then we hit the fort when their morale breaks." "That's a long campaign," I said. "Week or more, maybe 2. Do you have somewhere else to be?" I didn't. None of us did. We were rangers. The work was the work. We spent 12 days killing hunting parties. 6 orcs here, 7 orcs there. Always different locations. Always ambushes they never saw coming. Always total kills. No survivors to report what happened. Strider orchestrated it all. Picked the ambush sites. Planned the attacks. Led the strikes. He'd send 3 rangers one way as distraction, while he and the rest of us attacked from another angle. He'd read the terrain like a map only he could see, finding every advantage, exploiting every weakness. He was a tactician, a strategist, someone who'd studied war at the highest levels and applied it to small unit combat. "Where did you learn this?" I asked after the 8th ambush. "This isn't ranger training. This is something else." "I've served in armies," he said, not elaborating, never elaborating. "Which armies? Does it matter? I'm here now, helping you." By day 12, the orcs were barely sending out hunting parties. When they did, the groups were larger. 10 or 12 orcs, heavily armed, paranoid and jumpy. "They're breaking," Strider said. 3 more days, maybe less. On day 14, we attacked the fort at dawn. We didn't have the numbers to take it by force, but we had fire, we had arrows, and we had Strider. He stood on a hilltop, visible from the fort, and blew a horn, a clear, beautiful note that echoed across the valley. The orc guard saw him, saw one man, alone, challenging them. They came boiling out of the fort, maybe 70 orcs, enraged, terrified, desperate to kill this thing that had been hunting them for 2 weeks. They ran right into the ambush we'd prepared, fire arrows into their ranks, pits with stakes, trip lines, every ranger trick we knew, all prepared while Strider held their attention. 20 orcs died in the first minute. Another 15 in the chaos that followed. The rest tried to retreat back to the fort, but we were already moving, cutting off their escape, forcing them to fight in broken ground where their numbers didn't matter. Strider came down from the hill like vengeance. His sword took orc after orc. He fought in the thick of it, always moving, never stopping, his blade singing as it cut through armor and bone. The orcs broke, scattered, ran in all directions. We pursued, killing stragglers until the sun was high and the valley was quiet except for the cries of carrion birds. 70 orcs dead, 7 rangers standing. No losses on our side. Impossible. Should have been impossible. We were outnumbered 10 to 1, but we had Strider. We burned the fort, destroyed the weapons, made sure no other orcs would use this place as a staging ground. Then we headed back toward the Angle, exhausted but victorious. That night, around the fire, Beren finally asked the question we'd all been thinking. "Who are you, really?" Strider looked up from sharpening his sword. "I told you, I'm Strider." "That's not an answer. You fight like you trained with elves for decades. You speak Sindarin like you grew up in Rivendell. You plan battles like you've commanded armies. That sword you carry is worth more than everything 7 rangers own combined. You're not just some wanderer. So who are you?" Silence. Long and heavy. The fire crackled. Wind moved through the trees. "I'm someone who doesn't want to be found," Strider said finally. "Someone who has responsibilities I can't fulfill yet, and a name I can't claim. Someone who fights orcs and protects the borders because it needs doing and because..." He trailed off, stared into the fire. "Because?" I prompted. "Because these are my people. The Dunedain, the descendants of Numenor, the ones who remember what we were, even as we fade into nothing. The villages we protect, the borders we guard, the wild lands we keep safe. This is the kingdom that should have been. This is what we're protecting. Not just villages, not just people, but the idea that the Dunedain still matter, still serve, still remember." His voice was quiet, intense, full of something I couldn't name. Pain, maybe, or longing. "So yes," he continued, "I've trained in Rivendell. I've served in armies. I've lived a long time and learned many things. But right now, here, I'm just a ranger. Same as you. Doing the same work for the same reasons. But you're better than us," Targon said bluntly. "You're the best warrior I've ever seen. So why are you here? Why not somewhere important? Leading armies? Serving great lords? Making a real difference?" "This is a real difference." Strider's voice was firm, final. "Every orc we kill is one less orc threatening innocent people. Every raid we stop is lives saved. Every night we spend cold and hungry in the wild is a night someone else sleeps safely. This matters. This is important." He stood, shouldered his pack. "I'll take first watch." He walked into the darkness, left us sitting there, more confused than before. "He's nobility," Karamir said quietly. "Has to be. The way he talks, the way he moves. That's someone who was raised for command." "Fallen nobility, maybe," suggested Beren. "Family lost in some war, name disgraced, living in exile. Or he's protecting someone," I said, thinking about the way he talked about responsibility he couldn't fulfill yet. A name he couldn't claim. Maybe he can't reveal himself because it would endanger people he cares about. We debated it quietly, came to no conclusions, eventually gave up and went to sleep. Strider kept his secrets, and we stopped asking. I rode with Strider for 3 years total. 3 years of ranging through Eriador, hunting orcs, defending villages, keeping the borders safe. 3 years of learning from him, watching him, trying to understand him. In those 3 years, I saw him do impossible things. I saw him track a warg rider across 60 miles of bare rock. Saw him find the lair where the warg slept and kill both rider and beast in their sleep. Saw him speak to the beast in some guttural language before he killed it. Not black speech, but something older. Something the warg seemed to understand and fear. I saw him face down 12 orcs alone when the rest of our patrol was half a mile away. Saw him kill 11 and let the 12th escape. When I asked why, he said, "Fear is a weapon. Let one live and he'll tell stories. Make them afraid of us. Make them think twice before raiding south." I saw him save a village near the Brandywine from a raiding party. 20 orcs attacking at night while the villagers slept. Strider killed them all, every single one. The village woke to find dead orcs and no trace of who'd saved them. Strider wouldn't let us reveal ourselves. "They don't need to know," he said. "They don't need to see us. They just need to be safe." I saw him sit with a dying ranger, one of ours, ambushed by orcs while scouting ahead, and speak to him in Sindarin. Soft words I didn't understand, but that made the dying man smile. Made his last moments peaceful instead of agonized. The ranger died holding Strider's hand, looking at him like he was seeing something beyond sight, like he recognized something in Strider's face. Afterward, I asked what he'd said. I told him he served with honor, that he would be remembered, that the Dunedain endure because of men like him. "Did you know him?" "I know all of them." Strider's voice was quiet, sad. "Every ranger who's died in the last 40 years. I was at most of their funerals. I remember their names. 40 years. He'd been ranging for at least 40 years, which would make him 70? 80? But he moved like a man in his prime, fought with stamina that should have been impossible. "How old are you?" I asked. "Old enough to know better and young enough to do it anyway." He smiled slightly. That small, private smile. Age is relative. Some men live long lives and accomplish nothing. Others burn bright and brief. I'd rather burn. We fought bandits once. Men, not orcs. A gang of 30 preying on travelers along the North Road. Usually we left human crime to the Brief Folk and the Shire Watch, but these men had killed a family, mother, father, 3 children, and taken their goods. Strider tracked them to their camp, walked in alone while we watched from the tree line. "I'm giving you one chance," he told them. His voice carried across the clearing, hard as steel, cold as winter. "Leave Eriador. Never come back. Do that and you live. Stay, and you die tonight." They laughed, 30 bandits laughing at one man. Strider killed their leader with a thrown knife, 40 feet, right through the throat. The man dropped without a sound. 29, Strider said calmly. "Next one to laugh dies next." No one laughed. "You have until dawn to be gone. If I see any of you in Eriador after sunrise, I'll hunt you down one by one, and you'll wish the orcs had found you instead. Do you understand?" They understood. They were gone by dawn. We never saw them again. "You let them live," I said. "Why?" "They're men. Stupid, cruel, greedy men. But men. We don't kill men unless we have no choice. We're not executioners. We're guardians. There's a difference. They killed children. I know. And if I see them again, I'll kill them. But I gave them a chance to choose differently. To leave. To change. Most won't. But some might. And that possibility is worth preserving. He had principles, rigid ones. He'd kill 100 orcs without hesitation, but wouldn't kill a man unless forced to. He'd show mercy to bandits who didn't deserve it, because they were human, and humans could change. He'd protect villages that didn't know he existed, because protecting them was the point, not being thanked for it. He was honorable in ways I'd never seen before, in ways that seemed archaic, old-fashioned, like someone from another age who still believed in things the rest of the world had forgotten. The second year, we ranged farther south, down toward Tharbad, down toward the borders of what had once been Arnor and Gondor, the old kingdoms of the Dunedain. Strider knew the ruins, knew every broken tower and crumbled wall. He'd walk through them like someone visiting a grave, touch the old stones with reverence, speak names I didn't know, names of cities and lords and kingdoms that had fallen centuries ago. "You talk about these places like you knew them," I said once. We were camped in the ruins of a fortress that had been abandoned for 1,000 years. Strider was sitting on what had been a throne, staring at nothing. I know their history, their stories, the men who built them, the kings who ruled here, the wars they fought. He ran his hand along the stone armrest. This was a place of light once, a place where justice was served and oaths were kept, and the Dunedain stood as guardians of all free peoples. Now it's rubble, forgotten, abandoned. We remember, I said. Do we? He looked at me. What do you know about Arnor? About the kingdom that stood here before it fell? About the kings who ruled, and the wars they fought, and the oaths they swore? I know. Stories. Legends. Things my father told me. Stories fade. Legends become myths. Myths become nothing. In another 100 years, no one will remember what stood here. No one will remember that the Dunedain were once great. We'll just be rangers, wanderers, forgotten men guarding forgotten lands. Then why keep doing it? Why keep fighting if it's all going to be forgotten anyway? Because it's right. Simple. Final. Because someone has to. Because the people we protect deserve to live in safety, even if they never know who protects them. Because, he trailed off, stared at the ruins. Because maybe someday, someone will come who can rebuild this, who can restore what was lost. And when that day comes, we need to make sure there's still something left worth restoring. The way he said that, like he knew something I didn't, like he was waiting for something, preparing for something, protecting something until the right moment came. Who? I asked. Who's going to restore this? Someone. Someday. When the time is right. He stood, shouldered his pack. Until then, we keep the darkness at bay. We spent 3 months ranging around Tharbad, cleared out nests of orcs that had been raiding the few villages still standing in that region, escorted travelers through dangerous lands, protected merchants who paid us nothing because they never knew we were there. Strider seemed driven during those months, pushed us harder than before, like he was trying to accomplish something, trying to prove something. To himself, maybe. We didn't lose a single traveler. Didn't lose a single villager. Killed every orc band we found. Made that stretch of the North Road safer than it had been in 50 years. And Strider never once took credit. Never once revealed himself to the people we saved. Just worked in shadows and silence, and moved on when the work was done. The 3rd year, we were back in the north, ranging through the lone lands. Quiet work, few orcs, mostly just watching, waiting, keeping eyes on the borders. It was during this year that I finally understood who he was, or at least understood enough to be terrified by the implications. We were camped near Weathertop. Strider had gone off alone. Something he did occasionally, disappearing for hours at a time, coming back with information none of us could figure out how he'd obtained. I followed him. Not to spy, just curious, wanting to understand. He climbed Weathertop, stood at the summit where the old watchtower ruin still stood, looked south toward Rivendell, and he spoke in Sindarin. Too quiet for me to hear the words, but I heard the tone. Sad, longing, like someone talking to people who weren't there. Then he drew his sword, not to fight, just to hold it. And in the moonlight, I saw it clearly for the first time. The blade was ancient. First age work, maybe, or second. Definitely not something made by men. Too perfect, too beautiful. And there were runes on it, flowing script I couldn't read but recognized as Elvish. That sword was worth a kingdom, was the kind of blade carried by kings and heroes, was something that should be in a museum or an armory, not in the hands of a wandering ranger. He sheathed it, descended from the tower, nearly walked past me in the dark before he noticed I was there. Following me. No anger, just mild curiosity. I wanted to understand. Understand what? You. Who you are. Why you're here. What you're preparing for. He smiled. That sad, private smile. I'm preparing to serve, to protect, to be what my people need me to be when the time comes. Until then, I do this. I range, I fight orcs. I keep the borders safe. I wait. Wait for what? For the right moment. For the call. For... He paused, looked at me with those grey eyes. For a burden I've been avoiding to become one I can no longer refuse. What burden? One I'm not ready to discuss. He put his hand on my shoulder. I ride with you because you're good men doing necessary work. I fight beside you because the Dunedain deserve to be protected. And I keep my secrets because revealing them would serve no purpose except to complicate things. Can you accept that? I wanted to press, wanted answers, wanted to understand who this man really was and why he hid it. But I looked at him, at the weathered face and the grey-streaked hair and the eyes that had seen too much and carried too much, and I realized something. He was tired. Bone-tired in ways that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. Tired of carrying secrets and responsibilities and burdens he couldn't share. Yes, I said, I can accept that. Thank you. He squeezed my shoulder once, then released. We should get back to camp. Baron's keeping watch, and you know how nervous he gets when we're both gone. We walked back together. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. I knew enough. Knew that he was more than he appeared. Knew that he was waiting for something. Knew that when that moment came, he'd be ready. And I knew that I was privileged to have ridden with him, to have fought beside him, to have learned from him, even if I never knew his real name. After 3 years, Strider said he had to leave. We were camped near Bree. Early spring, year 2993. The same season we'd met. Everything coming full circle. I have business in the south, he said. Things I've delayed too long. People I need to see. Responsibilities I can't ignore anymore. Will you come back? I asked. Someday. Maybe. If I can. If I'm needed. You're needed here. Now. Always. He smiled. There are enough rangers in the north to keep the borders safe. You don't need me. You never really did. You just needed to remember that you were capable of doing this without someone leading you. You taught us a lot. I taught you nothing you didn't already know. I just showed you what you were capable of. He gripped my arm. Warrior to warrior. Keep doing the work, Halborn. Keep protecting the people who don't know they need protection. Keep remembering what the Dunedain stand for. Keep the light alive until someone comes who can restore it. Is that someone you? He paused. Perhaps. I don't know yet. I'm still deciding if I'm worthy of the responsibility, if I'm ready for what it means. But whether it's me or someone else, the work needs doing. And rangers like you are the ones keeping it possible. He left at dawn, just walked away into the spring morning. Didn't look back, didn't say goodbye. Just gone, like he'd always been. A grey ghost appearing when needed and vanishing when the work was done. I never saw him again. Not as Strider. Not as the ranger who'd ridden with us for 3 years. But I heard stories. Over the years that followed, I heard stories about the grey ghost, about a lone ranger who appeared in the darkest moments and saved people who thought they were doomed, about a warrior who fought like legends were supposed to fight, about a man who protected the borders from Fornost to Tharbad to the Shire, seemingly everywhere at once, never staying long enough to be thanked. Some rangers claimed they'd ridden with him. Others said they'd seen him in the distance. A few said they'd fought beside him in desperate battles, and he'd vanished afterward without giving his name. He became a legend among us. The Grey Ghost. The ranger who was more than a ranger. The one who'd been fighting longer than anyone could remember, and still fought like he was in his prime. And slowly, the legend grew. Spread beyond the rangers. Became the kind of story people told in taverns and around campfires. About a mysterious wanderer who helped people in trouble, who fought evil wherever he found it, who never asked for payment or thanks or recognition. Some said he was part elf. Some said he was a wizard in disguise. Some said he was the ghost of some ancient king still serving his people centuries after death. No one knew the truth. Not even the rangers who'd ridden with him. We kept our silence, kept his secrets, protected his identity because he'd asked us to. 20 years passed, then 23. I kept ranging, kept fighting orcs, kept doing the work, got older, got slower, knew my ranging days were numbered. And then the War of the Ring happened. The stories came from the south, rumors at first, then confirmed reports. Gondor was at war. Mordor had returned. Sauron, a name I'd thought was ancient history, was back and threatening all of Middle-earth. And the steward of Gondor had refused to light the beacons, had refused to call for aid, had decided to face the darkness alone, until the beacons were lit anyway, until Rohan answered the call, until an army marched to Gondor's aid. And leading that army, organizing the defense, commanding at the battles of Helm's Deep and the Pelennor fields, was a ranger. A mysterious ranger who'd appeared out of nowhere to help Rohan's king, who'd been revealed as the heir of Isildur, the lost king of Gondor, the man who would restore the kingdom that had fallen 3,000 years ago. His name was Aragorn. I heard the name and didn't make the connection at first. Why would I? Aragorn was a name from old legends, the chieftain of the Dunedain, the heir who would someday return and claim the throne. It wasn't until they announced the coronation, until they called all the free peoples to Minas Tirith to witness the return of the king, that I understood. I was too old to fight in the war, too old to ride south when the call came. But I wasn't too old to travel, wasn't too old to make the journey to see history happen. I reached Minas Tirith a week after the battle. The city was still rebuilding, still treating wounded, still mourning the dead. But there was joy there too, relief, hope. The darkness had been defeated. Sauron had fallen, the age of his shadow had ended, and they were crowning a king. The first king in 1,000 years. I stood in the crowd. Thousands of people packed into the courtyard before the White Tower. Elves from Rivendell and Lothlorien, dwarves from Erebor, hobbits from the Shire. Hobbits. I'd spent decades protecting them and never thought to see them here. Men from Rohan and Gondor and all the free peoples, all gathered to witness this moment. The ceremony began. The crown was brought forth, ancient, beautiful, restored after centuries in keeping. Gandalf was there. Gandalf the White, they called him now. No longer the Grey. Transformed by his battle with the Balrog. Returned with greater power and purpose. And then Aragorn walked forward. I saw him and my breath stopped. The weathered face, the grey-streaked hair, the way he moved, the set of his shoulders, the grey eyes that saw too much and carried too much. Strider, the ranger I'd ridden with, the man who'd saved my life and taught me and kept his secrets and vanished into the south 23 years ago. He was the king, had always been the king, had been the heir of Isildur, even when he'd been sleeping on cold ground and killing orcs in the dark and protecting villages that would never know his name. I'd been riding with the King of Gondor for 3 years and never knew it. I watched them crown him, watched Aragorn Elessar, son of Arathorn, heir of Isildur, take the throne his ancestors had abandoned, watched him accept the burden he'd been preparing for his entire life, the burden he'd spoken about in whispers, the one he'd been waiting for the right moment to claim. He stood tall, spoke the ancient oaths, accepted the crown and the sword and the scepter, became what he'd always been meant to be. And I understood, finally, why he'd hidden, why he'd wandered as a ranger, why he'd spent 60 years in the wild, protecting people who didn't know he existed. Because being a king isn't about sitting on a throne and giving orders. It's about serving, about sacrifice, about putting the needs of others before your own, about doing the hard, thankless work in the shadows, because it needs doing and because no one else will do it. Strider had been a king long before they crowned him. He'd been serving his people for 60 years, protecting them, fighting for them, preparing them, making sure that when the darkness came, there would still be something left worth defending. He'd been a king in exile, a king without a kingdom, a king who'd inherited nothing but responsibility and had spent his entire life honoring it. And now, finally, after 60 years, he was being recognized for what he'd always been. The ceremony ended. The crowd cheered. I stood there with tears running down my face. Afterward, I tried to leave, tried to slip away into the crowd. Didn't want to intrude. Didn't want to complicate his moment with reminders of the years he'd spent in hiding. But someone caught my arm. A guard. "The king wants to see you." I was brought to a side chamber, waited there for an hour, nervous and uncertain, wondering what he wanted, wondering if he even remembered me. Then the door opened and Aragorn walked in, not wearing the crown, not in royal robes, just simple clothes, looking like Strider again, like the ranger I'd known. "Halborn," he said, smiled, that same smile, the small private one. "I saw you in the crowd. I wondered if you'd come. My lord, Don't." He held up his hand. "Not you. Not after everything. You rode with me for 3 years and never once insisted on formality. Don't start now. You're the king. I'm Aragorn. And before that, I was Strider. And before that, I was a dozen other names in a dozen other places. But with you, I was just another ranger doing the work. That meant something. Still means something. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell me? Because it would have changed things. You'd have treated me differently, deferred to me, seen me as the heir instead of just another ranger. And I needed to be just another ranger. Needed to know that I could do the work without the weight of the name. Needed to prove to myself that I was worthy of the responsibility before I claimed it. He sat down, gestured for me to sit as well. "Those 3 years," he continued, "riding with you and Beren and the others, fighting orcs, protecting villages, doing the small, thankless work that keeps the world safe. Those were good years, important years. Years when I could just be a man doing necessary work instead of the heir of Isildur, carrying the weight of 3,000 years of expectation. We should have known. We should have recognized. Why? I worked very hard to make sure you wouldn't. Hid my identity, kept my secrets, deflected questions, because that's what I needed. To be anonymous, to serve without recognition, to know that I could do the work for its own sake, not for glory or acknowledgement." He leaned forward. "You taught me something, Halborn. You and all the rangers I rode with over the years. You taught me what service really means, what sacrifice looks like, what it means to fight for people who will never know you fought for them, to protect them, not because they'll thank you, but because they deserve protection. That lesson, that understanding, is what made me ready for this. He gestured toward the door, toward the throne room beyond, toward the crown waiting for him. I spent 60 years learning to be a king by learning to be a ranger, by doing the work without the title, by serving without recognition, by understanding that true leadership isn't about power or glory or being acknowledged. It's about doing what needs to be done because no one else will do it. You didn't need to learn that from us. You were already the best of us. I learned it from you anyway. He smiled. And I'm grateful for the 3 years, for the lessons, for treating me like a man instead of a legend, for keeping my secrets, for letting me be Strider instead of Aragorn. We sat in silence for a moment. Comfortable silence, like we were back around a campfire in the wild, just 2 rangers resting between patrols. "What will you do now?" he asked. "Will you keep ranging?" "I'm too old, too slow. My sword arm's not what it was. Time to let younger men do the work. There's a place for you here, if you want it. A position in the new court, an advisor's role. Someone who understands the rangers and can speak for them. I'm no courtier, neither am I. But we learn." He stood, offered his hand. "Think about it. No pressure. But if you decide you want to serve here, in this way, there's a place for you." I took his hand, gripped it. "I'll think about it." "Good," he smiled. "And Halborn, thank you. For everything. For riding with me. For teaching me. For keeping my secrets. For helping me understand what it means to serve without recognition. You did more than you know. We just did the work." "Exactly." His smile widened. "You did the work. Not for glory. Not for thanks. Just because it needed doing. That's what makes you, what makes all the rangers, special. You serve in silence, protect in shadow, fight without recognition. You're the ones who keep the world safe, while the great lords take credit. Someone has to. Yes, someone does. And I'm grateful it's people like you." He left. Had to return to the coronation festivities. Had to be the king. I stayed in that chamber for a long time, thinking about the 3 years, about the ranger who'd saved my life and taught me and kept secrets I was only now beginning to understand. About Strider, who was really Aragorn, who was really the king, who'd spent 60 years preparing for this moment by serving in silence and protecting people who would never know his name. About the man who'd been a king all along, but who'd chosen to be a ranger first, to learn what service meant before accepting the crown. I never took him up on his offer. Never joined the court in Minas Tirith. I'm not built for that life, for politics and ceremony and the weight of formality. But I visited once a year, every year for the next 10 years until age and illness made travel impossible. Visited and watched him rule. Watched him be the kind of king the Dunedain needed, the kind of king the world needed. Fair, just, wise, but also humble, accessible, still willing to listen to common rangers and farmers and merchants, still willing to do the work himself instead of delegating everything to servants, still willing to patrol the borders occasionally to remind himself what it felt like to serve in silence. He was a good king, the best king, because he'd learned to be a ranger first. And me? I spent my last years in Bree, running a small inn, telling stories to young rangers about the old days, about the patrols I'd run, the orcs I'd fought, the villages I'd protected. And sometimes, not often but sometimes, I'd tell them about Strider, about the Grey Ranger who'd ridden with us for 3 years, about the best warrior I'd ever seen, about the man who'd fought like legends were supposed to fight and then vanished into the south. I never told them who he really was, kept his secret even after it wasn't a secret anymore, because some things are sacred, some memories are private, and because I wanted them to understand something. Greatness doesn't announce itself. True kings serve in silence. Real heroes protect people who will never know their names. Strider taught me that. Showed me what service really means, what sacrifice looks like, what it means to be great without needing anyone to acknowledge your greatness. And I'm grateful I got to ride with him. Grateful I got to learn from him. Grateful I got to see both sides, the ranger in the wild and the king on the throne, and understand that they were the same person, that the throne didn't make him great. He was already great. The throne just gave him a larger stage to serve on. That's the story I tell. The story of 3 years riding with the king and not knowing it. The story of Strider, the ranger who became Aragorn the king but who'd been serving his people all along. The story of the greatest man I ever knew, who spent 60 years proving he was worthy of a crown by choosing not to wear it until the moment was right. And when that moment came, when he finally claimed what was his, he didn't change, didn't become someone different. He was still the same man, still serving, still protecting, still fighting for people who needed someone to fight for them. That's what makes a king. Not the crown, not the throne, not the title, the work, the service, the sacrifice, the willingness to do what needs doing, because no one else will do it. Strider taught me that, and I carried that lesson until the day I died. If you enjoyed this story of the lost years of Aragorn before the world knew him as king, hit that subscribe button. I've got more untold tales from Middle-earth. The witnesses who saw legends being made, who stood beside heroes and didn't realize it until years later. What other hidden years should I explore? What other mysteries from Tolkien's world deserve their stories told? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for listening to Halborn's testimony, the ranger who rode with a king and never knew. The man who learned what greatness really looks like when it doesn't announce itself. Thanks for watching.